got, we went over the general collection and creation of the main components. We'll talk about the actual creation of the texture after we do the building of this custom viewport. So in your content browser, in your editor folder, I've got here a custom viewport. So again, it is a editor utility widget. So you can create one of those. I'll open mine. Now this one's a little bit weird and annoying all at the same time. So I called mine custom viewport. Um, these are just some of my variables I've got in here. What did I set up in here? That it's focusable. That's a checkbox that needs to be selected if it's not. It is enabled. It's not hit testable for itself. Basically, those mean that you don't. Do you want it to recognize the button click, you know, or whatever? So not for the whole control. We just want it to do stuff for a certain part of it. And then I put in a size box. And I've made it, I guess, apparently 1024 by 512 high as a width override. I'm not exactly sure why it's that size, but it is. Anyways, it's just a size box. Then there's this viewport panel. This viewport panel is a canvas panel. So again, just find it in the side here, canvas. So canvas panel, pull it down. I called it a viewport panel. I made it the variable. It's set to fill and it's enabled. It's not hit testable, and that's about it for it. Then I put in a back image sizer. Okay, so this is kind of, it's the sizer that's going to hold this background image, right, that we see. And so this sizer I set to 512 by 512. And this background image, I don't think there's anything else. I think I've anchored it to the top corner. That's about it. Oh, it's Z order. That's an important one for here. Is it? Yeah. Its Z order needs to be set to 1 so that it draws on top of the canvas. Otherwise it gets hidden behind. I think that's what happens. And then I put in an image. So just up here an image. And then drag that in. I called mine the back image. It's set to fill that size box that it's sitting inside. I made the opacity 0 on the color and opacity, and on the tint, apparently. I'm just looking at where these default. I was probably just making sure that it, because this one does nothing here. I think this one, it does nothing here too, but I don't know why. Well, that's for the, yeah, no, that's right. Okay. What was there anything else that we did in here? Yeah, here. So the visibility of the image, though, is to be visible. So that means it is going to be the hit testable item on the control. And it being inside the size box, it's being drawn at the top level for it to be found. And because that size box is not hit testable, so everything I think works at that point. Now let's look at the code for this thing. Oh, it looks pretty simple. So here is a function that we can create. Um, where create viewport. Yeah, there it is right there. So you can create a new function and you can put it here. Um, and you'll open it up and it's got like a lot of stuff in it. But that'll be the one that's going to be the main workhorse that's going to actually create all of the components that are going to be going into the viewport. We need a variable for delta time. So just off your event tick, if you just promote delta time to a variable and then and give it, I think it comes up with the name in delta time because it just promotes to variable and it'll set it. So we'll use that later. That's to help capture when we're holding down a mouse key and we're orbiting around to change the orientation. That delta time is what's going to be used to smooth that operation. And then we have two mouse events. Event on mouse enter. So you can that should be available. So you just be able to go on mouse enter. It should be a default event that shows up, and on mouse leave. And so what we're going to use that for is to track a Boolean whether we are in the viewport area or we're outside of it. So just basically, so we're listening for our mouse events. So create a Boolean variable. I called mine entered, and it's a type Boolean. And so on mouse enter, set it to true, and on mouse leave, set it to false. And that's our main event graph. So let's look at creating the viewport. So if I go into here, so it's a multi-sequence item. I did not break all these down into separate functions just because I was still formatting and looking at a lot of things, but let me just pull this one up a little bit further and we'll go over it. So this is step one. And maybe we'll comment and we'll go step one. Create viewport. Oh, excuse me. Saved you from the sneeze. Okay, so construct viewport. Um, basically, that is it's construct object from class, and then you select the class, and it's going to be of type viewport, and it's right down here. Okay, and so that creates a viewport. It's a special object, and there might be a better way to do this because it is a widget type, but this is the way that I discovered it and learned it from a guy that was sharing it on the YouTubes there, one of the Epic developer guys. So the return value of that, drag it out and promote it to a variable and call it viewport because it won't come out as it'll be a return value or whatever it'll say. I called mine viewport. This viewport panel, that's my canvas panel, which you will need to have set as a variable. So drag it out from your variables, and we are going to add this viewport as a child. So off the viewport panel, you'll say add child, and there's the add child, and you'll drag your viewport into that. we now need to cast it to a canvas panel slot um, so that we can gain access to some of its functionality. So that should just be a cast to canvas panel slot. Off of this, there's two settings that we wanted to do. One is to set its size, and 1 and 1, I guess basically means, I think, means to fill it. And then we want to set the anchors to be the top left corner, which is when you come off of this and you want to set anchors. If you want to set anchors, it's going to look like this. So just right click this and split it, and then you can type in the values. So it's 0, 0 for the minimum and 1, 1 for the maximums. And I'm pretty sure that puts it to the top left corner. And so that, because we're setting all this stuff up programmatically inside of our canvas panel, we're not going to see it in our designer. Then we can take our viewport and we want to set its view location. So it's kind of like the camera location. It's not the camera, but it's its view location. And what I set mine to be is X at minus 200, Y at positive 200, and Z at positive 200. Set it anywhere you want. But after you set that, you should be able to, well, let's see what happens. Well, do I want to do that? Maybe I don't. So you can always then, you can run this particular thing and you'll see something like this. So that's step 1. Step 2. Let's just move this guy up a little bit and I'll give him a comment. I'll go step 2 and we'll zoom in and see what we're doing. So we're going to add the camera actor. Add a camera actor. Because we want to be able to pan around and look at stuff, right? So grab your viewport and we want to spawn. So off of viewport, type in spawn and we want to viewport spawn. And the actor class that we want to do is a camera actor. And that'll be that. From here you can, we want to cast that to a camera actor. Why you had to do this, it baffles my brain, but cast it to a camera actor and then promote that to a variable. It'll be called as camera actor. I truncated it to camera actor. From that, we want to get the camera component. So off of the camera actor, get camera component. Right at the bottom, get camera component. Why that didn't show up, I don't know. So there you go. Off the camera component, we want to set the field of view. It's a funny thing that's going on here that I was having issues with trying to get the render view, target view to coincide with the camera view. And there's seems to be limited adjustment or control of that. So trial and error, 75 degrees, setting the camera component field of view to 75 degrees gets it to basically get you to what you see is what you get. So you can set that. Also off the camera component, set its mobility. So set it to movable so we can actually move it around. And the last thing is its default, I think, is a landscape be 16 by 9 or whatever. We want an aspect ratio of 1 because, well, I want square icons because this would be somewhere where you would play with that if you wanted a different shape, and then make sure your render target is appropriately sized when we get to that as well. So that's step 2. Step 3, what are we doing here? Okay, so step 3 is kind of a good one. It's a little bit more involved. It really is akin to the camera. So we'll comment step 3, add uh, scene capture 2D. So this is our scene capture 2D. So again, similar as before, grab your viewport, spawn, just like we did up here. And then the actor that we want to spawn is a scene capture 2D. Then cast it to a scene capture 2D and promote it to a variable because we'll use it. From the scene capture 2D, we want to get the capture component from that. So off the scene capture 2D variable, uh, capture component 2D, and probably have to scroll all the way to the bottom. Get the capture component 2D. Yoink. Set it to movable. So what we're going to be doing is this thing we're gonna place this right at the same spot that we're going to hold the camera view, and so that it's going to capture whatever the camera is going to see because we're gonna keep them in the same orientation and rotation and location as the camera view. So set it movable. Set its field of view to 75 degrees. Um, I guess, where did I do that? I guess yeah, no, that's right. So drag off of this and set field of view. There, I didn't make a new variable, didn't make a variable, so just set field of view and set it to 75 just so that they're the same. We want to set the texture target. So it's going to want a value which we'll create right after we're done this step. We'll go and create that so we can set this value. So set a texture target. Again, texture target. So we'll just set the texture target. Yeah, those aren't special variables or anything. And then off of this as well, we want to set its composite mode to overwrite. We want to set its prime render mode um, to use show only list. We're going to modify this a little bit depending on what we want later on, but this is going to be the default. And so so set that to use show only list. And then the capture source, use scene color in RGB, HDR in RGB with the inverse opacity in alpha. So in other words, wherever there is something, um, the the alpha is going to be set to 1, and wherever there's nothing, the alpha will be 0, or the inverse of that. Anyways, we'll get the outline. We'll get the we'll get the object. The other option there is with 0 in A, which basically you're going to have an opaque background. So this will give us a clear background. We do not want it to capture every frame because that would be a headache. And we don't want to capture it on movement. So set those both defaults. So let's go over and create this render texture target. So back to our content browser. In your editor folder, right click, and we want to create a texture render target. So you can click that. Now open mine. I called mine RTT for render texture target underscore icon. I said no maps because they're going to be icons, so we don't need different variations of it, I guess, if that's what that means. Texture group is UI. Um, Here's where you can set your render size. So I set mine to 512 by 512. Basically, just wanting to uh, cover off cases where you're using it as an object in an inventory list or on a other side screen UI that's a little bit bigger than just a regular click icon or something like that. So 512 by 12 will give a good screen size and smaller than that, and keep the reasonable um, asset size and as far as everything else goes. Um, all of this is remaining default, and that's it. So those are the only things that I changed, and that's all that we need to set. So you can close that now, save and close that, and then come back into your custom viewport, and you can set that item into your texture target here. Moving right along, step 4. What is step 4 gonna do? Okay, so step 4, we are going to step 4, um, static mesh setup. So we're going to have a static mesh component in here that we will set from elsewhere, but it'll always be this one that gets set. So from your viewport, we're in a spawn, and we want to spawn a static mesh actor. We are going to cast that to a static mesh actor. From the static mesh actor, we are going to promote that to a variable. I called mine my display mesh. From that, get the static mesh component. For the static mesh component, set its mobility to movable. And this one's a bit of a pile here. So remember up here for the texture target, we said we wanted to use the show only list. So now that we've got this display mesh, we want to add it to this show only actor array. So from your scene capture 2D, get your capture component 2D, get your show only actors array, and then add an item to it, and then plug in your display mesh. And then we'll cover this view location after we finish the rest of these. So there's 2 of these view location and view rotation functions that we'll cover at the end. So that gives us a spot or an object that we can drop our mesh into to get a rendered view of it. The next step here is step 5, and we're going to go skeletal. mesh setup. So it's almost exactly the same, except that we are spawning a skeletal mesh actor. We are casting it to a skeletal mesh actor. We are promoting it to a variable. I called mine display skeletal mesh. We want to get the skeletal mesh component. We're setting its mobility to movable. I really don't know if I need. Anyways, I set it to movable. And copy the same stack of controls up here to the show only actors, but this time you can plug in your display skeletal mesh as the item to add. And then we'll look at this default view location again after. And then this step is obviously, I could probably adjust this one, but maybe I'll do that. Step 6, set up the default views. So maybe I will, I'm going to unconnect this one. I'm going to drag it down. I'll put that there, and I'm going to delete that one, and we'll plug this one in here. So let's go and look at those now. So default view location. So let's set the default view location. Basically, it's just a function. This was all in there, so that's I just collapsed it to a function. So you can create a new function on the side. So add a function, set default view location, and you'll come in here. Give it a input, Boolean input. I called mine skeletal mesh because that's we're going to get the viewpoint differently between a skeletal mesh and a regular static mesh because they hold their data a little bit differently. Um, so let's look at the static mesh first. And you might have your better way of doing this, so feel free. So from the display mesh, you can drag it in, get your static mesh component. I got the local bounds of it. So it's going to be placed at 000 when it gets added to the scene. And so it's going to have a minimum X and a maximum X. So I'm basically getting the size in X by taking that difference between the max X, which is positive, and the minimum X, which is likely negative. And when I subtract those two, I get a total width across the of the object, similar in Y and Z. And then I multiplied that by some factors here, which seem to be good. You can modify and play with these numbers if you will. But if you recall back to when we created the viewport initially, right? We set a view location of 200, 200, 200 with the negative, positive, positive. So that's 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. And if you think the default cube in Blender or whatever else is a 1 meter cube, so we're just kind of getting away, moving away from a little bit and just kind of centering around it, right? So that this is, if this was a 1 meter cube, I'm moving -2 and 2, and I put 1.5 here as I've tweaked that in over a little bit. So these are just 3 multiplications. I pulled those out to make a vector, x, y, z, and I brought that out and called it, promoted that to a variable, and you can call it location. So off of your Boolean, I went for a branch, and so if it's false, that means it's not a skeletal mesh. So it's just our static mesh, and I'm going to set the location on that side. If it is a skeletal mesh, we're going to set location, but we're going to set its view location based off of properties of the skeletal mesh. So from the skeletal mesh component, we can get the component bounds, which is really what I thought this was going to give me, but I don't know why. It doesn't seem to have the same thing. Anyways, the box extent x, which is really what this value turns out to be, and the box extent y. So I split that variable that comes out of here, the bounds vector. And for x, I multiplied by negative 0.5, the y by 8, multiplied times by 8, and the z I multiplied by 1.5. Now this is obviously going to be different for a lot of different characters. It doesn't really matter what any of this is. So play with it to be whatever you're normally working with. Um, and for whatever project, just so that you don't need to always be adjusting little bits all the time. Create a vector and then set your location. And then that's what we'll use going forward. So first off, grab your viewport and we want to set the view location. Remember, that's kind of the viewport, the camera location view. And we can then set our location to that, whichever way it was. So that's going to get us looking at the where we think we're looking from. Then we want to move our scene capture 2D to that location. And then we're going to move our camera actor to that location. And I'm pretty sure I played with not worrying about a camera at all. But I don't know if it worked. I think the camera and this scene capture, I think have to play together. So that's what sets up there. So that sets our default view. That's just so that we got some reasonable way to have it to starting point. So if I go into my entry widget or my icon maker and I give it a run and I grab a mesh, oops, and I click on it and it started me here, which was a nice spot. If I click it again, it resets me to that spot, right? And so if you, depending on how you wanted to look at your guy from, or if you get all buggered around and don't know where you are, you can just click back. Okay, so that was the intent for that. So that is default view. So default view rotation, again, just create another function, set default view rotation. Similarly, with the skeletal mesh variable on it. And we are going to set the viewpoint, the look at from location a little bit differently depending on what you got. So for the static mesh, we are going to get its actor location and we set its actor's location basically at the point of its pivot. For the skeletal mesh, which its pivot point is basically at its feet, and without this being adjusted a little bit, you always end up with you're looking at the guy's feet. So you can get the component bounds on this and then split your vector for the box extents and grab the Z value and add it to your skeletal mesh actor location, Z value. So that'll get us to point our head up and look at the guy's head. And then remake that vector with the X and Y location and then with the adjusted Z value and stuff that in and call it our actor location. Now down here, since this is about rotation, we actually want to get our viewport. We're going to get its view location, right? We've already adjusted it by um, we have already adjusted our location of it. And now we've got this look at rotation from our viewport point to our actor that we've just set here. So plug those in, and then we'll get this rotator um, that we'll use to set our view of our viewport rotation. And then we'll also set the rotation of our scene capture 2D and our camera actor. And now everything's in sync, and we're all lined up, and everything's working. So that's what's going on there. So now if we go back to our create viewport, so we've done that step now. And what's this last one do? Let's come in here. So we're okay, yeah. So this, I guess this one probably could have been done earlier. Maybe I'll move it up later, but this is step 7, setup uh, environment. So this is the sky sphere that is going to be our background, because we're going to have the option of having that clear background behind your icons, or have a generated scene that you can create separately and reference in here, and then all of your icons would have that same background texture. So again, grab your viewport. We're going to spawn in a static mesh actor. So this is very similar to the one as above. Cast it to the static mesh actor. Get its static mesh component. I didn't bother putting this to a variable because, you know, we only use it here. We want to set the static mesh. I set it to the sky sphere. If I browse to that, that is the down in the engine content. So you can just, if you go into, if you're clicking on the content and you just type in sky sphere, you'll find it right there. Now there seems to be two of them. One's in engine sky, and the other one is in map template sky. I don't know which one I used. I used the one in map template sky. So there you go. Give it a scale just so that it can paint on whatever texture that we end up using on it. So this one's been scaled up by 100 on all the axes. And now we want to be able to change it. So we need to create a dynamic material instance off of for our component. So we want to, I think you just come here and you just type in create dynamic material instance. The world context object is again just from where, so this is just ourself. The parent is going to be a material that we are going to create. We'll follow that shortly because we're almost done here. That's about it. And so that, promote that to a variable. It promotes to dynamic material background. I don't know if I need to make it a variable. Maybe I did. We'll find out more. And off of it, we want to then set material. Well, actually, no. We want to come off your static mesh component, right? and come off of it and set material, right? Set material. So you set material and then you can stuff in your dynamic material into there. And then we'll have a dynamic material there, and now we'll be able to play with that. Now there's okay, so one small correction here. The I guess one thing I should do is I should make a copy of this static mesh so that yeah, let's browse to that. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to want to duplicate that. And I'm going to move it to my editor. I don't know. Let's open that up and just yeah, it seems to be it's just a static mesh. I'll close that. Oops. And then I'm going to rename that to sky sphere icon something, just so that I know that it's part of this system. And this I'm going to move, I'm going to reference here. Yeah, so that's that. Just that way, if the engine changes or whatever, that they rename that or change that, that won't get buggered up, you know, as you move it around different projects. So, and then that way we have that object in our editor data stuff. So the last thing here, far as this step goes, is we need to build this parent material, you know, which is here in my editor. So what you can do is just go new material and open it up. So after you've opened up created your material instance, with it selected, change the shading model to unlit. And then what you want to do is we want to build this emissive color. Um, and so I've seen a couple of different videos on this, but this seems to be the simplest. And if you've got more experience with material shaders, have at it. But basically we want a texture sample. So just a texture sample. And you can plug the RGB into the emissive color. Off of the UVs, or we want to get a reflection uh, uh, WS world normal space. I don't know, world space. Anyways, reflection vector. Plug that into the UVs. And it, what does it want here? Yeah, well, it certainly is a pretty nice reflection. And I guess it wants an internal point. So for 0, 0, 0, which is, I guess, the zero inside of it, so that it reflects to the outside. Only theorizing there. I'm not exactly sure what this thing does. Um, and then we wanted to be able to change this value. So we wanted to expose this as a texture parameter. So come off your texture thing here and go texture uh, texture object parameter, right? And it'll default to this thing here, which it won't like very much, because it's the wrong type. Because this wants it to be I think these are the same. Yeah, that's what you do. So, oh yeah, there's my, I added some, let me just clear that out. plug this in. So from this default, from your parameter texture object that you stuffed into there, I named mine background texture because this is the parameter name that we're going to be using when we modify this texture. For its default texture, if you come in here, you can just type in quad, and it'll come up with this texture cube, and that's the type that we need in here for this sky sphere. And the sampler type is color, although this one says linear color. Seems to be happy. Yep. Because I think this one has to be color because it's a quad, it's a 3D space for this thing to be happy with it. Not entirely sure. There's the material. It works. That sets that. That's just this. That's it for that. Okay, so when we come back, we will work on the grabbing the mouse and key movements to be able to move around the object.